Hi, I'm Kyle, the host at MedCircle, and it is a very exciting time for MedCircle because we are launching our very first podcast. And this is after years of our members and our millions of viewers across the world telling us, hey, MedCircle, why don't you have a podcast? Why can't I listen to MedCircle stories and get inspired through that platform? Well, wait no longer. It will be coming out next week. Well, I guess you do have to wait a little longer. It comes out next week on January 16th. And this podcast is going to be unlike anything MedCircle has produced in the past. It has a complete focus on the patient story. And even when I say the word patient, sometimes that can be a little stigmatizing. We're talking about lived experiences, individuals with real stories and real experiences in the mental health space. It's going to be a podcast where we're going to learn a lot. But I think even more than that, we're going to realize that we're not alone. We're all in this together. And that although we are all so different at the core, aren't we all the same? The host of this podcast is Jackie Colbeth. Jackie Colbeth has been a co-founder of MedCircle and has been critical in developing MedCircle over the years, and is now showing her face for one of the first times right here on YouTube. Jackie, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited for next week, but really I'm excited to talk to you right now. It's All in Your Head podcast. The host, Jackie Colbeth. Welcome to YouTube.
Kyle, so great to see you. Thanks for having me.
Now, in some ways, Jackie, this podcast, I consider it in some ways a coming out vehicle for you. Because you're getting raw, real, vulnerable. I appreciate it. Tell me what that is like to be 100% authentic yourself in front of the world.
Absolutely terrifying, I think would be the short answer. I can elaborate a little bit. It's an anxiety-ridden, scary thing, I think, for anybody to do. Mm-hmm. However, I think that we're in a time now in our culture where people like myself, people who've been afraid to talk about this, kind of need to break through, almost, get over that in a sense, because our current state of mental health issues is scary. It's scary, and in talking about it can be scary. So it's my hope that speaking about this more normalizes it, helps erase a stigma, and viewers are going to be able to point to actual people that they can see and listen to, and hopefully get the inspiration or hope that they need to feel better.
Yeah. You named your podcast It's All in Your Head. We've been teasing a little bit of it on YouTube, and I've seen some people comment, what do you mean it's all in my head? I hate when people say that to me, and that's kind of the point. Why did you name it that?
Because I hate it when people would say that to me. It to me, it was perfect in the sense where you are calling out something, even if it's a passing phrase, you're calling it out as something that, that phrase is so dismissive, Kyle. It's a dismissive phrase. It's, let's say someone's open and vulnerable enough to share their feelings with you, to come to you for some sort of help, and you give them it's all in your head. Well, to be cheeky, I think everything's in our head. Mm-hmm. Okay, everything lives up here. This is like the main center. So yes, it was tongue in cheek that I picked that name, but like the audience who commented on it, I share their sentiments.
Yeah, I think it does resonate with people. Do you remember the first time someone told you that it's all in your head?
Probably in adolescence. I mean, that's where my bipolar 2 depression really manifested. Mm-hmm. So if I was trying to articulate that in an inarticulate way at 12 or 13 years old, it was easy for people to be like, that's all in your head. Yeah. Those feelings are all in your head. Those thoughts are all in your head. They're indigenous to you, in turn making you feel extremely alone. And I used to get frustrated because I wanted to be like, well, no crap, it's in my head.
Yeah.
as is everything. And hearing that phrase, it doesn't sit well with me. It didn't then, it doesn't today.
Yeah. I remember being about 9 years old, maybe 10, and feeling trapped in my head, feeling trapped in my brain, and not having the ability to communicate that feeling of being trapped. And I was lucky actually to have parents who saw that and said, well, we should find help. We should find therapy. We should find treatment. But a lot of people, to your point, it's all in your head. You get over it, and that is hard to hear when you're saying, yeah, I know it's all in my head. Help me. You're to your point. And I'm looking at the comments on YouTube Live here, and people are really resonating with that. It's something that we've all been told, even if we weren't told it as blatantly as it's all in your head. Yes. I think it's all in your head also means get over it. Or, you have so much to be happy for. How could you possibly be sad? Or why can't you just not pick up a bottle and choose another activity? All of those things, that dismissiveness is what really gets to people. You, in your podcast, you've interviewed a lot of people with lived experiences exclusively. Mm-hmm. Could you tease for us some of the conversations and highlights that people can expect upcoming in It's All in Your Head podcast?
Sure. So the main focus would be on any sort of diagnosed mental disorders, but also behavioral disorders too. I think people get, rightfully focused medically, do I have an imbalance? Is this a chemical, genetic, inherited mental struggle, or is this a behavioral struggle? I've had both. So I can tell you that I thought it was very important to also integrate some behavioral disorders. What I mean by that, to give specifics, is not only are we going to be speaking with people who have diagnoses that are in the DSM-5 and can be diagnosed by a doctor, but we want to talk to people about things like digital addiction, pornography addiction, sex addiction. These aren't, things in a diagnostic manual, but for the love of God, I would say the behavioral struggles probably outweigh any diagnosed mental struggles. So many people have these and they also get dismissed. Like, well, I can't be addicted to that. I can't be addicted to digital media or pornography. That's not a real thing. And it is a real thing. And I want to point that out because it's 2023 now. And there are generations, Kyle, who don't know life without. I'm analog. I remember life before Wi-Fi and the internet, when it was dial-up. We don't have generations, now that are ever going to remember life like that. So I think bringing to light these different behavioral addictions, a lot of which involve online content, is something really interesting. I hope the audience gets a lot from those combos.
You mentioned at the top of this discussion that you were diagnosed, or that when your adolescence, your bipolar 2 is when you first started to see that arise. When were you officially diagnosed?
I wasn't officially diagnosed until about a year after I quit drinking, which would have been in 2003. So I was 23 years old when I was diagnosed.
So that's like a 10-year of not having the diagnosis of bipolar 2 disorder.
Oh yeah, it was an action-packed 10 years.
Yeah.
It was an action-packed 10 years. I like to tell people, I quit drinking very young because I was just on, sixth gear with that. And I fit decades into one decade, and we were good there. But it's a solid decade of, for me, self-medicating personally. I'm a recovering alcoholic. I used alcohol to self-medicate. This makes me kind of like the average person, I feel like, in society now, right? And that was something that was occurring during that 10-year period. I had doctors diagnose me with depression, not bipolar 2, but there are many nuances. Even with bipolar disorder, it's a spectrum. So symptoms can manifest differently, but it was sort of one of those things where, you get the diagnosis, you get the stigma. It might not even necessarily be correct, but at the time, I also didn't really want help, to be frank. I mean, when I was 13, 14, 15, I was not interested in working on myself. I was not interested in going to psychotherapy. I was not interested at all.
Mm-hmm.
So within those 10 years too, I would say I wasn't ready.
Mm.
I really wasn't ready to feel better. I was ready to explore whatever lanes I was exploring, drugs and alcohol being a prominent lane. And that's what had to happen.
For you, was there a moment that occurred that made the change happen?
Yeah. To be very candid, it was August 18th, 2003. I was off like a 3-day coke bender. So I was up for 3 days running around the city of Chicago, shoving this up my nose, washing it down with Jack Daniels. And I got back to my apartment, and my best friend in the world was my roommate at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And to this day, we live in the same city, and we're still close, but she's someone I love an unbelievable amount. And even in my messed up haze, she looked at me and she's like, I'm moving out. I can't really do this. You know, you come, you go, you bring strangers in the house. You're out of control. I can't really deal with this. And she left the apartment. I went back into my bedroom and I looked in the mirror, and I was just shoving like blow up my nose as the blood was like running out of it. And obviously, you know, I looked like something out of a Stephen King novel. Hadn't slept, my eyes are all bloodshot, hadn't eaten. And I felt, and I'm not particularly religious, but I did feel almost this voice of, keep this up and you're gonna die.
Mm.
And it shocked me enough to my core, Kyle, where I woke up, walked across Newbury Park in Chicago, and checked myself into an outpatient rehab program for alcohol at the Hazelden Clinic.
Wow.
And that was the last sip of alcohol I've had. And the motivating factor was really I was afraid I'd die.
And no relapses from that moment.
I've not had a drop of alcohol since
Wow.
that day.
Thank you for sharing that story. Was that difficult to share? Or did that feel natural?
You know, it's interesting. It's not like it hasn't been, I mean, it hasn't been told on YouTube or any sort of large media platform. It's usually around, you know, people I trust, but I trust our audience. I trust you. I trust the goodness of MedCircle members. And that makes it easy. Although I don't envision my parents are going to love hearing that, or people who love me a lot. But you know what? That was what it was.
How did you reconnect with your ex-roommate? She never left, Kyle. I mean, this is the testament to the fabric of my friend. She was there and attended 12-step meetings with me. She checked on me every day. She was a constant source of acceptance and love. So reconnecting with her once I decided I want to better myself, which in turn only betters our relationship, right? Which is what I desperately wanted. I can say she never left, but I can say she loved me enough to have a bit of tough love when it was time to have that. But she had that tough love without ever leaving my life, which I tell her all the time, I'm eternally grateful. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that part too. You know, 2 years ago, we did a month of interviews with people with lived experiences. And without question, they said education, hugely important, treatment, hugely important. But for many of them, the missing piece was a community, was support, was having that friend, and a friend who can be a real friend and show the tough love when you got to show tough love.
Yeah.
I think sometimes people think when we set a boundary with somebody that it's a negative thing and we're going to hurt them because we need a boundary for us.
Right.
But oftentimes that boundary is healthy on both sides. And kudos to your friend to navigate that with you. Really
Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
I am so amped for these episodes. A lot because you're in all of them, Jackie. You have
Try to be
so
a little
much
bit.
experience. You're so funny. You're so articulate. Full disclosure, I know Jackie outside of MedCircle, okay? And I love Jackie Colbeth. She is, and nobody meets Jackie and goes, that was okay. Everyone meets her and goes, wow, how do I get more of that energy? Why? Actually, I'm going to ask you that. Why, how do you have so much energy? You're always amped, you're always on it. Huh?
Because I have bipolar 2 disorder, Kyle. So you might be catching me during those periods where I have a little bit more energy. But with that said, to quote Lady Gaga, I was born this way.
Yeah.
And when I say I was born with a lot of energy, Kyle, when my mother was pregnant, I would kick her stomach so hard, her shirt would be, like coming off of her stomach. And it was just, the energy was in the womb. The energy, I came out screaming. The energy seemed to just, it's there, but that's part of my personality, right? I joke with bipolar 2 disorder. Do you have moments of feeling a bit more energized? I need less sleep at those times. Yeah, sure. But I think it's also important to note, I know a lot of bipolar 2 people who don't have sort of this kind of wild energy or squirrely energy that I can get. And that's not a knock. That's just not, there's character and personality and there's your illness. And half the battle is getting to decipher what is me and what is my disorder. Because you got to separate those. Otherwise, you're identifying totally with your disorder and you're not taking into account what's your personality.
Yeah. Right. I've never heard it put that way. And that was really captivating. Dr. Judy once, who's a triple board
Judy.
Dr. Judy, triple board certified forensic and neuropsychologist. She had us doing our MedCircle member workshops. And if you're watching on YouTube and you haven't checked out MedCircle.com, we have a lot of great stuff there that never makes it out onto YouTube. So check MedCircle.com out. But in one of our workshops, she had us draw out our depression or our anxiety on a piece of paper for us to visualize that separation. And I've taken that same mentality to my own mental health. When I have those bouts of depression, I go, look at my depression. Not I'm so down and out. Look at my depression, that separation. Yeah.
Yes.
We're launching next week on the 16th with the first episode about the topic of borderline personality disorder, very stigmatized in the mental. I think it's probably the most stigmatized disorder in mental health. And specifically on how to support somebody with that. You talked to a woman named Paula, and we're going to provide a inside look into that episode at the end of this video. But what would viewers or listeners expect in this conversation with you and Paula?
Expect to be totally captivated and expect to learn so much about what you rightfully say, Kyle, is one of probably the most misunderstood, most highly stigmatized disorders, borderline personality disorder, commonly referred to as BPD. What I love about Paula's episode is this highlights someone who has dedicated their life to starting a foundation in honor of her younger sister, who sadly had passed away due to an adverse reaction to medication that she was put on while under medical care. And a lot of times, for good reason, the focus is on the one who's struggling, the one who's acute, right? The one who's diagnosed. However, many of these people, we have families, we have loved ones, and their voices, we want them to be there for support. But I think it's important for them to express in their words and in their experience, what is it like loving people who are diagnosed with this In Paula's case, it was loving her sister who was diagnosed with this. And it gives a perspective that I think anybody who's struggling, it would behoove them to watch and understand and connect that this is a family disorder. These are illnesses and diagnoses that impact more than just the patient.
Yeah.
They can impact husbands, wives, immediate family. It's important to hear those voices too and incorporate those, because when you listen to Paula, you can tell, you see the love, you listen to how she worked through that unbelievable amount of grief. And you sit back and you say, wow, there are people who care about this an unbelievable amount. And while they might not have the actual, name tag of the diagnosis associated with them, they are doing so much in their respective fields to erase the stigma. And I just found it unbelievably inspiring, and very happy to put that perspective on a platform.
Yeah, thank you for doing that. And that episode will come out on January 16th. If you go to medcircle.com/podcast, we'll also include a link to that page below this video. You can see all the episodes that are upcoming, the topics and featured guests. You can also subscribe to Jackie's email list, where you'll get notified of new episodes, releases, and MedCircle resources. All of that for free, medcircle.com/podcast, or use the links. Now, if I'm reading the chat, okay? I'm glancing over there. We have a lot of people who are mental health advocates.
Go easy on me.
No, everyone's being nice to you, Jackie, I promise. But they're amped about this because they see the value of telling the patient story, of understanding the patient journey or the lived experience journey. So I'm talking to you right now, if you're watching this live or even on recording. You have a really easy thing you can do right now to put your advocacy in motion, and it would help spread this message. And that is either share this video or share that podcast with a friend, family member, or loved one. Oftentimes, that introduction that you provide can be the catalyst to insight, to change, to knowledge that can have profound effects. And sometimes just sharing that information is all that it takes. So thank you for all of those who do share MedCircle resources or any mental health resources with their friends and family and loved ones. Jackie, this is so fabulous. I'm excited to do this every week with you.
I can't wait. I've been wanting to do this. As Kyle mentioned, I've had a personal relationship with Kyle for a long time. And the timing wasn't there. I was involved in a different career, but every time I'd leave being with Kyle, I was like, God, I would just love to chat with him. It's so easy. And I'm looking so forward to chatting with you every week. Really, it's a highlight.
Oh, me, I look forward to it too. And nobody is not that. And guys, Jackie and I are not just going to come on here and tell each other how great we are every week. Okay. We will get into other stuff too. Okay. I want to make sure like there's Kyle and Jackie every Wednesday talking about how great the other one is. We'll get into it, but we're going to recap episodes. We're going to take fewer questions. We're going to discuss and unpack, the discussions that exist in the It's All in Your Head podcast. There's a lot we're going to do right here on YouTube, but to be a part of it, listen to the podcast. It will be available anywhere you listen to podcasts. And of course, right here on the MedCircle YouTube channel. We're going to end this video with a sneak peek, never before released, never before seen. You are getting it very first right now to the very first premiere episode featuring Paula and how to support somebody with borderline personality disorder. Jackie Colbeth, thank you for being here. Congrats on your podcast, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks so much, Kyle. Love you.
All right. Enjoy this clip, y'all. Bye.
So my younger sister, Pamela, was struggling with mental health issues when she was in college. She had to be admitted to the hospital. She was having what at the time we were told was a breakdown. Multiple hospitalizations later, about 6 months into her journey, when some self-harm symptoms started, suicidal thoughts, difficulty with impulsive behaviors and expressing herself in relationships. She finally got a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder. And my sister passed away in 2001. She died because of a medication error. So the grief that first couple of years was just really trying to understand what happened, why did it happen, and dealing with that sort of shame, blame, and guilt that a lot of surviving family members feel. My mom and I wrote a book called Remnants of a Life on Paper. A mother and daughter struggle with borderline personality disorder. And the more people came up to us and said that they really related and that they wanted to do more for people with BPD, really caused us to be thinking more broadly about how we can use Pamela's story for good and for change.